Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar in our cat behavior series, Understanding Your Feline Friend. My name is Brianna, and I am the Associate Director of Community Engagement and Events here at Alley Cat Allies. And for this afternoon, I will also be your moderator. Now, I do have just a few things. I want to walk through a few housekeeping items. And since this is the first webinar in our new series, we really would like to have your feedback. And so after this webinar, you are all going to receive a follow-up email. In that email will be a link to a brief survey. Please, please, please take a moment and let us know what you thought. Is there something that we could do to make your experience better? Are there questions we haven't answered? Are there topics you'd really like to see featured in upcoming webinars? This series is a result of the feedback we got from previous webinars, and so trust me when I say that we are here to serve you. So as we move right along, we are going to have a lot of information to share with you, and so please be ready to take some notes. If we do move too fast, or if you feel like you've missed some of the information, please do not fret. This session is being recorded. I'm going to say that again. This session is being recorded, and you will all receive a link to that recorded session in a follow-up email. All of our webinars are also available to download and stream online for free at alleycat.org/webinar. While you're on alleycat.org/webinar, you can also register for the upcoming sessions in this cat behavior series. Next month, we have behavioral enrichment for your cat. And in July, we have common behavior problems in cats. And so those three webinars, those two combined with today's webinar, will complete our cat behavior series. And so we hope that you will tune in and learn as much as possible. We do have a number of other webinars. Just to name a few, we have our cat advocacy series, which 101 and 201, and combined those webinars will help you with everything from basic policy and ordinance questions all the way to working with elected officials. And so if you are perhaps new to helping outdoor or community cats, don't fret, we have a webinar for you too. Our Helping Cats in Your Community webinar is our Trap, Neuter, Return, or TNR Basics webinar, which goes over the very first things you should know about starting to do any kind of trap, neuter, return program with cats in your community. If you are a native Spanish speaker, or if you happen to work with a lot of Spanish speakers, we also have that same TNR Basics webinar in a Spanish language presentation. So as we move through the webinar, I know you all have a lot of different questions about the cats in your lives, and so please do use the toolbar to enter a question, and you can see on your screen how to do that. As your moderator, I'm going to be queuing those up for you. And we will go over those, or as many as we can, at the end of today's presentation. So as we move right along, I do want to ask you a little bit about yourself. Please go ahead and use that questions box to tell us who you are. Where are you from? Do you work in an animal welfare organization, or maybe you're just a cat owner? And why did you come here today? We really want to know more about you, and that way we have a better idea of how to help you. So while you're filling out that information, I'm just going to keep moving right along. I'm going to mention our Feral Friends Network. And so this is our database of people and places worldwide who are helping cats. And so I often call it our phone book for cat people. And so this is a listing of anyone from individuals or groups who are doing trap, neuter, return, all the way through fosters, educators, advocates, and even spay-neuter clinics and veterinary professionals. And so it's a little bit of everyone out there ready to help cats. And so this is a great resource. If you're new to helping specifically outdoor cats and you want to connect with people in your backyard, this is a great way to do that. You can pull up the list, reach out to someone in your community, and maybe even volunteer with them, get some hands-on experience. If you're already an experienced advocate and trapper or caregiver, maybe you'd like to join. We'd love to have you. We're always looking to grow our resources. So go ahead, and I encourage you to visit alleycat.org/feralfriends to learn more and maybe even submit an application. And while I have your attention, I do just want to briefly mention this exciting program Alley Cat Allies has available. And this is our Wait Until 8 program. And this is really the framework for shelters or rescues to implement in order to empower their community to keep neonatal kittens out of shelters and in the hands of people who can help them most. As we all know, it's kitten season. I'm sorry if you live in a warmer climate, it's probably always kitten season, but I know at least here, as temperatures rise, we see more and more kittens entering shelters. And so the Wait Until 8 program offers lots of information and advice on creating kitten care kits that can help turn your community members into neonatal kitten fosters. Oh, that was a lot from me, so thank you for bearing with me. We have a lot of really interesting information to go over today, and so here's just a very brief outline of what we have to talk about. We're going to start with just learning more about cats, and then we're going to move right through to their senses and how they're different from our own. We're going to talk about things like marking behavior and body language, vocalizations, cats' emotions, and then on to their lifestyle. And so in here to talk about all of that with you is Kelly Bolin. Kelly is a certified animal behavior consultant with a master's degree in animal behavior, and she has worked in the field of companion animal behavior for over 17 years. Kelly is the owner and executive director of Animal Alliances, LLC, an animal behavior consulting business. Kelly consults with private pet owners experiencing behavior problems with their pets and with animal shelters across the country. Kelly also provides educational seminars to veterinarians, animal shelters, and the pet-owning public. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and we are just so excited to have you here with us today, Kelly.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, fellow cat lovers. I assume everyone that's on this webinar loves cats as much as I do, and I hope everybody's having a nice spring because it's going to be a beautiful spring and summer, and so everybody's excited about that. I want to start by thanking Alley Cat Allies for putting on this webinar. They're a wonderful organization and they do really great things for cats, and it's my pleasure to do this webinar for them and to do this webinar for you to try to educate you a little bit more about your cat. And I'm sure, like me, there are a lot of things about cats that you are curious about, why they do certain things and how they see the world. And I hope that I can answer many of your questions today during this webinar, but also the 2 webinars coming up in this series. And so where we want to start today is talking about understanding your cat a little bit better. Next. Okay, so we'll start by this amazing picture of this amazing cat. So again, I know all of you are cat lovers or you wouldn't be here. Cats are really amazing animals, and I hope by the end of this webinar you realize how interesting and amazing they really are. Next. Okay, where do cats come from? Well, cats evolved from the semi-arboreal African wildcat. What arboreal means is that they live in trees. So semi-arboreal species are species that live on the ground sometimes, but they can also be in the trees. And if you look at these pictures of this African wildcat, you can probably see your own cat. In fact, one of my cats looks pretty similar to one of these guys. And so you can see the resemblance. The cats have not changed very much as they have become domesticated and become our pets in our home. Next. So let's talk about domestication. So it used to be thought that cats were first domesticated in Egypt, and we know that the Egyptians really worshipped and protected cats. But recent research has shown that they actually were domesticated longer ago than that. They were domesticated almost 10,000 years ago in the island of Cyprus. And this top picture here shows you the findings from a burial ground where they found a human skeleton and a cat skeleton buried together. And so, of course, we assume that that means that the cats lived with the humans as their companions. Now, cats were domesticated because of their predatory nature. because they kill rodents, basically, they were able to protect the grain stores that the humans had. So they, the humans would have their grain, and the cats would get rid of all the little rodents and keep things safe. And so they became worshipped and protected. And then cats made their way to North America in the 17th century. And again, they came here for the same reason. They were imported because of their predatory nature and their ability to hunt rodents and keep food stores safe. Next. So cats becoming popular. We know that cats are a very popular pet nowadays in the United States. Their rise in popularity over the last 150 years. They are now the most popular pet in the United States. They are surpass dogs 3 to 1. In fact, 1/3 of all U.S. households have at least one cat. And we know that people spend a lot of money on their cats. In fact, billions of dollars are spent on cats each year when we talk about veterinary care and food and clothing, as you see in this picture, and everything else silly we do with our cats. Next. So I wanted to start a little bit about, where it starts. Talk about breeding for a second. Cats become sexually mature at 5 months of age. Now, this is when they're still kittens, so they're not socially mature yet. They're not adults, and so it's almost like kittens having kittens. But cats do start having litters as young as 5 months of age. And when a female gets pregnant, her gestation period, the amount of time that she is pregnant before she gives birth, is anywhere between 63 and 67 days. And an interesting fact about cats is that a litter of cats can have different fathers, because the female cat, when she's in heat, will take on lots of different male suitors. And so you can have a litter with 2 or 3 different fathers for those kittens. And female cats can have 2 to 3 litters every year, and there's usually 1 to 8 kittens in each litter. And so what that means is that in her lifetime, a female cat, if she's not spayed, can have as many as 100 kittens in her lifetime. In fact, they've actually added this up, that a single pair of cats and all of their offspring can produce 420,000 kittens in only 7 years. And this is why it's so important for us, obviously, to spay and neuter our cats, because they can easily take over the place. Next. Now let's talk a little bit about their development. Cats are born blind and deaf, but they can smell. So their sense of smell is there at birth, and their sense of smell is really, really important. And they use that sense of smell to find where the milk comes from. So that's the first sense that comes along. And then about 1 week of age, their eyes open and they can start to see. And then at 2 weeks of age, their ears pop open and they can start to hear. And this is also the time when they start moving around and moving from place to place without having to be carried by mom. Now, cats are weaned at about 4 weeks of age, and the weaning process is basically mom saying, milk machine is closed right now. And so she starts having the kittens, resisting the kitten's urge to want to nurse, and the kittens start eating more solid food. This 4 weeks of age also marks the time when they start playing. They start playing with each other. They start playing with their mom, batting at her tail and things like that. And you start seeing predatory actions in kittens as young as 5 weeks of age. So in their play, you can see them stalking and jumping on, mom's tail or each other. And so that is their development stages. Next. I want to talk a little bit about a cat's social life. So their ancestors, those African wildcats, were solitary or are solitary. But cats now are social creatures. And so humans have played a role in cats becoming more social with each other. Excuse me. Because when humans started forming villages and there was lots more food available for cats, cats had to learn how to tolerate each other more because there was such a great food source near the human villages. So it's actually humans that played a role in cats becoming more social with each other. Next. Now, I said cats are social, and they certainly are, but cats are very particular about their social partners. Cats do prefer their relatives to live with. In fact, feral cat colonies are matriarchal, so it's mom and all of her daughters, and the boys usually go off on their own. And so sometimes, you know, when we bring a cat into our home, a new cat, things don't quite work out because just because they have become more social with each other doesn't mean they like every other individual cat they meet. And so one of the things I'll talk about in the third webinar about behavior problems is that sort of relationship problems within the home. But we do know that they can live peacefully with other cats. They do prefer their own relatives, however. Next. Cats are very flexible in their sociability, and they can form social relationships with other species. We know this is true because we bring them into our homes, and they obviously form a social relationship with us humans. But how many of you, I'm sure, have a cat and a dog that get along? And so cats can form social relationships with dogs, with rats, as you see on the bottom slide, which is a pretty funny picture. They can really form social relationships with any other animal as long as they're introduced to that animal early in life when they're open to learning about who their social partners are. I have goats and I have cats who love my goats, and so they go in and hang out with the goats. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about a cat's socialization period. What the socialization period is, it's a time in an infant's life when their brain is open to learning about who their social partners are, what to expect in their life, and to just basically get exposed to the things that will happen to them in life. The critical period for socialization in cats is from 3 to 7 weeks of age. Now, for those of you who have dogs, the socialization period for dogs is 3 to 12 weeks of age. And so the socialization period for cats is much shorter than dogs. And it's this brief period of time when kittens can learn to trust humans. If kittens are exposed to humans before they're 8 weeks old, then you'll see a more human social cat. If a cat has never been exposed to humans before they're 8 weeks old, then basically they're feral. And so they just, that socialization window closes pretty early and it closes pretty quickly. And then it becomes much more difficult to socialize the kittens to humans. Next. Let's talk a little bit about their instincts. So domestication hasn't changed very much about the cat. In fact, if you think about all the other domesticated animals, dogs included, cows, pigs, we've actually manipulated their behavior through selective breeding. But we haven't done that with cats. Now, certainly there is some selective breeding with cats, but it's a very small percentage of cats that are purebred cats that have been selectively bred by humans. Most cats, it's just natural selection basically has brought on domestication. In other words, the cats that could live with and around humans are the ones that, you know, started becoming domesticated pets. And so their instincts really haven't changed very much. They still retain all the instincts of their wild predecessors. Next. And of course, cats, we know, still are true predators. So unlike dogs who are not predators anymore, dogs will still retain some predatory instincts. They'll chase a squirrel up the tree, But dogs are not considered true predators. A true predator is an animal that will hunt, kill, and eat another animal. And of course, cats are still true predators. That nothing has changed from their ancestors when it comes to that. Next. I want to talk a little bit about their senses because cats sense the world differently than humans do. And one of the things that I find is that it's really hard for humans to kind of understand their cat or their dog because we always think of things from our perception. And basically that's what we are able to do, you know, our sense of hearing and our sense of sight, and we think that all other animals are the same. But I think it's really important that people understand how their pets sense the world and how it's different than us. Next. So let's start with their auditory sense, their sense of hearing. So cats actually hear in what we call the ultrasonic range. And we call it the ultrasonic range because we can't hear it. Humans can only hear up to 20 kilohertz, but cats can hear up to 80 kilohertz. And they hear sounds that we can't hear. In particular, they can hear the high-pitched squeaky sounds of their prey, of baby rodents who are making little noises to call their mom back to the nest. They can hear these sounds. So cats are hearing things all the time that we humans can't hear. And so oftentimes you'll see your cat alert to something and you think, oh, I don't hear anything. And that's because they hear something that you can't. Next. Let's talk about their vision for a second. So we know that cats have excellent night vision. They have a very highly flexible pupil. The pupil, of course, is the black part of the eye. And that pupil, in fact, can get larger, 3 times larger than our own pupil. So your pupil gets bigger or dilates when you're in low light because your eye is trying to pull in as much light as possible. So a cat's pupil gets way bigger than our pupil. And so they can bring in a lot more light than humans can. They also have a structure in their eye called the light reflecting tapetum. And that tapetum also helps bring more light into the eye. And so cats can see in 1/6 of the illumination of humans. So they can see basically in the dark. And they also have very motion sensitive vision. And so they can detect the slightest little motion in the grass or you know, wherever they're hunting. They can detect very slight little motion. And of course, motion triggers cats to behave. And that's why if you're playing with your cat and you move something really fast, it draws the cat to it, and they can't help but chase it because they have this motion sensitive vision. Another thing about their vision that people ask me, can cats see color? Well, cats see in the blue and yellow range. They don't see greens and reds, so they're basically like a human colorblind person. But they do see shades of color just differently than we do. Next. Next is their olfactory sense, or their sense of smell. Now, humans have 5 million scent receptors. And that sounds like a lot until you compare it to a cat. A cat has 67 million scent receptors. And smell is really important to cats. It's important for communication. So they smell each other's you know, excretions, and they also can recognize each other by scent. And we do believe that cats also recognize individual humans by their scent as well. If you ever go into your cat, you know, go to sit down next to your cat, just notice that first thing your cat does is sniff you. And so they're sniffing, make sure it's you, they're sniffing about where you've been, what you might be doing, and so their sense of smell is really, really important to them. Next. Cats also have a specialized organ called the vomeral nasal organ. Now, all mammals have this vomeral nasal organ except for humans. We've lost our vomeral nasal organ through evolution. But what this organ does is it detects pheromones. What pheromones are chemical signals emitted out of specialized glands in the body. And cats will emit pheromones that only other cats can detect. So they're species specific. And dogs emit dog pheromones that dogs detect. Cats emit cat pheromones that only cats detect. And the mechanism for using this vomeral nasal organ is the opening to the organ is right behind the incisor teeth. And so when a cat does this funky behavior called the Feline response that you see in the picture there, that's when a cat partially opens their mouth and they are basically sucking in the air. And they're sucking in the air and pushing it up into their vomeral nasal organ. And you'll often see them doing that after they smell the urine of another cat or something like that. They can also do this Feline response when they smell something in the air because the wind currents are carrying some scent that's interesting to them. And so they'll do the Feline and pull those pheromones into this vomeral nasal organ. So it's a pretty cool thing. Next. Let's talk about their touch sense. Okay, so cats' whiskers, they're actually called tactile vibrissae. They're specialized hairs, and they are like little sensors, and they transmit sensory information right into the brain. And so their whiskers are really, really important, and they use their whiskers to determine where they are in their environment. And yes, it is true that they can use their whiskers to tell whether or not they can fit through an opening, because they have little sensors at the base of their whiskers, and it tells them how much their whiskers being bent and whether or not the rest of their body will be able to fit in there. So their whiskers aren't just pretty, they're actually really important structures. Next. The pads of their feet are super duper sensitive. They're very sensitive to vibration. They have sensors in those pads that tell them what's underneath them so they can detect the surfaces underneath them. And an interesting fact about cats' sense of vibration, they can detect an earthquake tremor 10 or 15 minutes before a human can detect it. So we know that animals have senses that we don't have, and they can often tell when things are about ready to happen. But for cats, it's this amazing sensitive foot pad that can detect these slight vibrations in the earth so that they can know when an earthquake's coming. So if you live in an earthquake-prone area, watch your cat next time. The other thing about the pads of their feet is, I totally lost they have little glands in the pads of their feet, and that's going to come up again in a minute when I talk about marking behavior. Next. That's where we're going next. So I want to talk about marking behavior because it's a really important behavior for cats, and it's a behavior that oftentimes causes human upset because they destroy things. But marking behavior is very, very important to cats, and they mark in several different ways. Next. The first way they mark is by scratching things. Now, scratching is not just something cats like to do. It's actually something they need to do. They do the scratching to remove the dead nail sheaths on their nails, as you can see in that picture. When they scratch, those dead nail sheaths come off. But scratching is also used as a marking behavior. So I was saying earlier that they have little glands in their foot pads, and they leave deposits on whatever it is that they have marked, scent deposits. But they also, with their claws, leave a visual marker, as you see on your furniture. And so when a cat is scratching, they're doing it for lots of reasons. They're doing it for claw maintenance, but they're also doing it to mark their territory. And marking of territory is important for cats, not only because they want to let other cats know this is their territory, but also because it makes them recognize their own territory and feel more comfortable in their environment. So when it all smells like them, then that makes them feel more comfortable. Next. Cats also have this annoying marking behavior of spraying, and spraying is where a cat squirts urine out vertically out the back, and they will mark certain things. Both females and male cats spray, although male cats have a tendency to spray more often. Certainly unneutered male cats spray the most. Neutering the cat will sometimes take care of that problem, but this is a normal cat behavior. It is not about litter box problems. It is about marking behavior. So sometimes if your cat is spraying in the house, it really has nothing to do with your litter box. It has to do with this cat feels the necessity to mark the territory for whatever reason, whether there's conflict in the house with another cat or there's outdoor cats roaming around below the windows and your cat feels stressed about that and they feel the need to mark. So that's another marking strategy for cats. Next. Cats also mark with their facial glands, and this is why they rub all over you and rub all over the surfaces in your environment. They rub on each other. They have glands in their face, which I'll show you on the next slide. And what's going on is that they feel more comfortable when their environment and the things that are in their mind, theirs, their people, their sister, their couch, when they can mark it with their own scent, and it becomes a familiar environment for them. But cats do like to mark on their humans as well. Next. You can see here in this picture where these scent glands are in the cat's face. And so they have a lot of these glands in their face, and that's why they're always rubbing their face on things in the environment. Next. The next thing I want to talk about is reading cat body language. Now, cats do speak with their bodies, and oftentimes people don't pay a lot of attention to their body language. Cats are sometimes desperately trying to tell you something, but we just don't pay enough attention to know what they're trying to say to us. So I think it's really important that anybody who lives or works with cats, understand a little bit about their body language. Next. So we'll start with talking about their ears. So we know that a cat's ears can move independently. They actually have 20 different muscles that control the movement of their ears. So it's pretty sophisticated. And their ears can rotate, and they act as little sonar scanners. And so it helps them hunt for their prey, especially at night, so they can see in the dark, but they can also hear and direct their ears so that they can pinpoint exactly where their prey is. But cats also use their ears for communication, to talk to each other. Their ear movements mean different things. Next. So this diagram here shows us a little bit about how they can move their ears to send a message. The first one on the top left shows a cat who's just relaxed and their ears are just neutral. When a cat becomes attentive, so they're interested in something, whether it's a prey item or a toy or their person or a dog, what will happen is their ears will come closer together and the openings will face forward. And that makes sense because they're trying to bring in as much of the sound as they possibly can into their ear, and so those ears rotate forward to give all that surface area forward. When a cat is fearful, they will pin their ears back. Now, they pin their ears back for a couple of reasons. One reason is because they want to protect their ears, because if they were to get in a fight or get attacked by a predator, their ears are very vulnerable. But they also put their ears back to look smaller as they're trying to kind of fade into the environment when they're afraid of something. They want to look as small and inconspicuous as they can. When cats are aggressive, when they're feeling a little bit angry, they can twist their ears so that their openings are facing sideways. And so when you see a cat giving you eye contact with their ears rotated sideways like this, it often means they're a little bit angry and agitated. Next. So if we just look at these pictures, again, the top left picture is just a cat with neutral ears, although they look a little bit pointed forward and looks like the cat's taking in as much as they can from the environment. The second one on the top looks like this cat is getting a little bit agitated because one of his ears has rotated sideways. And down the two cats on the bottom, their ears are starting to flatten out as they are showing fear behavior. And in the one on the right, you see that you can't even really see their ears anymore. And so that is a truly fearful cat that is trying to look small, but also trying to protect those important structures. Next. Let's look at their eyes for a second. So we talked a little bit about their eyes. An interesting fact about a cat's eyes, their eyes are very big in proportion to their head. Their eyes are almost the size of our eyes, which is really quite interesting. But when we look at their pupils, this is how we can tell a little bit about their emotional state if we're not changing the light. So the first picture is a cat's pupil in a neutral state, so it's just neutral, moderate light, neutral emotional state. And then we move into the fearful cat, and you can see that his pupils are giant. Okay, his pupils have dilated. Now if this happens when there's no light changing, so you didn't just turn off the light, which makes the pupil bigger, if this just happens and the light has not changed, it means that your cat has now become fearful. So huge dilated pupils means fearful. And then if we look at the other cat, when cats constrict their pupils and they're just little slits, oftentimes, again, emotionally that can mean that they're angry. It can also mean light changes, because if we throw the light on, then their pupil will constrict. But if no light changes have occurred and their pupil gets real slitty like this, that is an indication that your cat is getting a little annoyed or agitated. Next. I want to talk a little bit more about their whiskers. So I talked a little bit about what the whiskers do for the cats in terms of the sensory information they give about the environment. But when they can also move these whiskers, again, depending on what's going on and what they're doing. And so when a cat is alert and they're trying to understand something, something in the environment, a change in the environment, a new person, a dog walked up, a bird made a noise, they will fan their whiskers out. And again, these are little sensory hairs, so they'll fan them out to try to pick up as much information as they can in the environment. When a cat is fearful, they flatten those whiskers against their face. So again, for one reason is to look smaller, but the main reason is when they're afraid that they're going to be injured, they want to protect those very important sensory hairs, and so they flatten them against their face. Next. Their tail is a great barometer of how they're feeling. Anyone who owns a cat knows that a high vertical tail is a friendly greeting. So when you walk in your house and your cat comes to greet you, they'll have that high tail. And so that is a friendly greeting. When a cat is afraid, they will tuck their tail. So again, they're trying to protect their body parts, but they're also trying to look as small as possible. Now, cats can puff out the hair on their tail, and they can do this when they feel a threat, whether they feel they have to be defensive or offensive, whether they are going to try to protect themselves or if they're afraid and going to run away. Their tail will puff out. And so this is a sign of an emotional change in your cat. Next. Now, if just the end of your cat's tail is twitching a little or wagging a little, it usually just means the cat is interested in something. So you'll watch your cat looking out the window at the birds, and you will see the little tip of their tail just wagging back and forth. And that tells you that they're interested. But if their tail starts swishing from side to side, that's an indication that the cat is becoming irritated. And if their tail is violently swishing, that means that the cat is really angry. And so it's not true of dogs either, but a wagging tail does not mean a friendly cat, so you have to remember that. Next. So here's a cute little diagram that you can get if you get online and punch in cat tail language. And it's just kind of cute, gives you a little idea of what the cat might be feeling based on the position of their tail. Next. And again, looking at pictures of real cats, the cat on the upper left is showing that high flag tail friendly greeting. The tail of the other top cat is just relaxed and neutral. It has a nice wrapped around his body and his feet. The cat is feeling calm and comfortable. The bottom left, you see a cat whose tail has now raised up to the level of its back. And that's an indication that the cat is now alerting to something. And so their tail comes up and it gets a little stiff, and you usually see some other things like their whiskers will rotate forward and their ears will rotate forward. The next kitty in the middle, that's a cat who is very afraid, and he's trying to look as big as possible. So this is the cat who's afraid, but he's bold enough to try to scare the threat away. And so he's puffing out his body and he's puffing out his tail. And then the last kitty there, we see a tuck tail and we see ears back. And so that is a cat who's pretty extremely fearful. Next. Now let's look at their body postures for a second. We know that when cats are totally relaxed, you will see their feet up in the air. If their feet are in the air, you know pretty much that they're relaxed. Oftentimes they will expose their belly and stretch out, and you know that they're really relaxed. Now this doesn't mean that they want you to come over and pet their belly. I do have one cat that loves the belly rub, but most cats don't like their belly rubbed. But when you see them relaxed like this, it's really a great scene. Wonderful. You feel good about your kitty. Next. Now this body posture, as I talked about earlier, if we look at the different things we see here, his ears have rotated sideways, his whiskers have rotated forward, his back is arched, his body is turned sideways, and his hair is standing up. So this is a cat who is fearful, but is trying to look really big to try to scare away its opponent. Now cats, when they're fighting with each other, really do everything they can to try to persuade each other to back down. So they do that by looking big and different vocalizations that I'll talk about in a second, because they really want to avoid fighting. All-out fighting is really dangerous for cats because they are very well armed. They have very sharp claws and very sharp teeth, and when a fight ensues, oftentimes there's injury. So cats do try desperately to give signals to back off their opponent or the threat. And so this is one way they do it. They try to look as big as possible. Next. This cat here, if we look at him, his muscles are tense, he's leaning back, his ears are back, his pupils are dilated, his whiskers are rotated forward, and his forelimb is ready for striking. So this is most likely a cat who feels trapped. The cat is fearful and he's being defensively aggressive. So he's trying to scare, and if you don't scare off, then he might have to lash out at you. So oftentimes you'll see this position cats that feel trapped, whether they're trapped in a corner by a little child, or they're trapped by a dog, or they're trapped in a cage in a shelter. You will see this position. Next. The next thing I want to talk about is their vocalizations. Next. We start with the meow. The meow, the vocalizations that we love because cats meow to us. Interesting thing about the meow is that kittens meow to their mom. It's basically a signal that is asking for something. But adult cats rarely meow to other cats. This vocalization is mostly directed to humans. So it's a vocalization that kittens use, but then the adult cats grow out of. But through domestication, the cat has learned to use their meow, their kitten meow, to get things from us humans. and it often works. So it can be a demand or a request for something, feed me, let me out. So that's the interesting thing about the meow, that it is mostly directed to us. Next. Now the purr, everybody loves the purr. The purr is just this really cool sound, and we're not really sure exactly why or how a cat purrs, but we believe it's produced as the vocal cords are vibrated by a special set of muscles. Now most people think cats purr only when they're happy and content, and they certainly do purr when they're happy and content, but cats can also purr when they're anxious, and they can also purr when they're sick. So it's really an odd thing to see a cat that's really ill or injured and they'll be purring. So we think it's a kind of a self-soothing behavior that helps them feel a little better if they're injured or sick or they're really anxious. So we love the purr, but it doesn't always mean that the cat is happy. You have to look at the situation. Next. Now, the predatory chattering that's the little sound cats will make, and you can see a cat doing this, although you can't hear it. Usually they do this when they see birds outside. They'll do this little chattering sound, and I wish I could imitate it, but I don't really have that skill. Next. And then we have the hissing, the growling, and the spitting. And cats will do these vocalizations when they're annoyed, when they're frightened, when they're angry. And obviously they're meant to send the message to leave me alone or back off or you're really making me mad. And that's what those vocalizations are meant for. Next. And then we have the howl or the yowl. Now we know that females in heat will yowl and howl mainly because they're howling for a mate. We know that male cats, especially unneutered male cats around intact female cats who are competing for the right to breed, will yowl and howl during fighting. And then cats will also yowl or howl when they're in distress. And so your house cat who is spayed or neutered is probably not howling for those reasons, but if you hear your cat howling or yowling, it usually means the cat is in some kind of distress. Next. I want to talk a little bit about emotions, and of course here's our most famous cat, and these people have gotten really rich with their cat's look, and he's a funny guy. But let's talk about their emotions. Next. So cats really experience the same basic emotions that we do. The part of the brain called the limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain, their limbic system and our limbic system is really quite similar. The differences in a cat brain and a human brain is in the size and complexity of our cerebral cortex, or the thinking part of our brain. But that limbic system is really similar, and so they do share the same basic emotions that we do. Next. So they can feel joy and love, and we do know that they show it to us all the time when they rub on us, and just really you can tell when a cat is happy and joyous and feeling love, whether it's with a human or another cat or even a dog or a mouse or whatever other animal it's been socialized to. Next. And they can feel fear, of course. All animals feel fear. Fear is an emotion that helps animals survive. Fear triggers a response, the flight or fight response, and I'm sure you've all heard of that response. And so fear is a very important emotion. And so when a cat triggers to fear like any other animal, it triggers a whole physiological response that gets the cat ready to either run away, flight, or try to make the scary thing go away, and that's fight. And again, we talked about the body parts, and in this picture you can see the huge dilated pupils of this cat indicating that she is afraid. Next. And cats can also feel anger. So joy and happiness and fear and anger are the basic emotions that we share with cats. And so cats can get very irritated and angry with things, and they can show that through the behaviors that we talked about. Next. And lastly, I want to talk just a little bit about their lifestyle. Next. Cats sleep 70% of their life. So cats spend 16 to 18 hours sleeping. And so, you know, this is part of their lifestyle. What do they do the rest of the time? Well, they spend 30% of their waking time grooming. They groom themselves 30% of the time. If there are other cats in the house, they might spend more time grooming that other cat. They spend time eating. They spend time wandering around. But most of the time, cats are sleeping. Next. And sometimes I feel like lucky them, because they get to sleep all day and we have to do all the hard work that we do to make sure that they're comfortable and have everything they want in their lives. Next. Okay, so that's it. We have a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions, I will say that if you have questions about your individual animal, your individual cat, and a behavior problem that you might be experiencing, I just want to remind you that we will be doing the third in this series is about common behavior problems in cats, and I'll be covering things like inappropriate elimination, and I will talk about spraying in that category. We'll talk about aggression and scratching furniture and all the sorts of common things that you experience with your pet cat. So if you have one of those questions, please tune in to that third webinar in the series. And I want to thank you for your attention, and we'll bring Brianna back in.
All right, thank you so much, Kelly. I know I learned a lot. I do see a whole bunch of questions coming in, so please do go ahead and submit your questions. We're very, very grateful to have so many of you with us today, but that also means we might not get to everybody's question. I know that Kelly did mention a webinar number 3, which is coming up in July, and that will focus on behavior problems. So please do tune in July for that. But then also next month, we have a webinar coming up on enrichment, which is very important as we want to keep our cats healthy and active and engaged. And so I do encourage you, again, hop on alleycat.org/webinar to register for those. And so without further ado, I'm going to go over some of the questions we got earlier during the webinar. You were talking a bit about the pads of cats' feet and marking, and the question was, do cats sweat through their feet?
They do. That's the only place cats sweat, just like dogs. And so if a cat is really, really nervous, they will sweat through their foot pads. You'll also see them when they're really hot, they will pant.
That is very interesting. I didn't know about sweating through the pads. That's a new one for me. So a couple questions about pupils. Can a larger pupil mean that a cat is over-aroused, or can it mean that they're about to pounce on something, or is it only that they're afraid?
Oh, no, it can mean, yes, that's a really great thing to bring up. So it's the dilated pupil means that something has changed emotionally for the cat. So a cat who's aroused in play, a cat who's aroused in predatory hunt, they also will dilate their pupils if they get really, really excited. So yes, you will oftentimes see your cat's pupils dilate if you start playing with them with a feather dancer or something like that. Good question.
Thank you. Okay, so and then someone else logged on has a question about their cat who walks around, and they describe it as a chirp. And it sounds like their cats are chirping to each other. Do you know what that might be?
I guess I probably don't really know exactly. I mean, if she could, you know, record it and send it, that would be a good thing to do. We can take a look at it. But if they seem to be chirping at each other, it must just be a social vocalization. Maybe it's just a orienting, you know, here I am. Maybe it's a come groom me, a request kind of behavior. Maybe it's an invitation to play. I have to say, I honestly don't know.
All right, thank you. And so a question that I think is very important, especially because this is Alley Cat Allies. can you really tell if a cat is fearful and social or whether they're a feral cat?
Oh, well, this is a really great question, and this is a question that we have been asking for many, many years in the shelter field, because it is really hard sometimes to tell when you bring a cat in, if a cat's caught in a trap. You know, a socialized cat who's really fearful can act just like a feral cat because they're so afraid. And so the ASPCA has actually done some research on looking at what behaviors, at least from the perspective of a shelter, to try to identify a feral versus frightened cat. And so there's a couple of behaviors they have found that if a cat meows, obviously, then that is a cat that's most likely not a feral cat. That is a friendly cat that is just afraid. If a cat approaches a human, that is another behavior that they found. If a cat will play, obviously that's a cat that is probably socialized. And so a feral cat, when they're trapped like that, they're not going to do any of those behaviors. And there's a whole list, and there's a couple of papers online that you can read from the ASPCA taking a look at that. And I'd be glad to share that research with people if you want to email me directly.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you very much for that answer. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling through everyone's really, really great questions. I am going to kind of defer on some of the more behavioral questions. Again, I really encourage you to log on and join us in July for some of those. But back on this webinar, we have a question that says, do cats only use the Feline response in response to another cat's smell? My cat is an only cat, and I frequently see her doing that. Is she smelling my previous cat who passed away? It sounds like it was about 6 months ago. I'm so sorry that your cat passed away, by the way. And just wondering if she's feeling threatened by his smell.
No, well, it certainly could be that he's smelling the leftover scent and pheromones in the house from the previous cat. It doesn't necessarily mean that she's uncomfortable with that scent. It's just an identification thing. And so a cat will just all of a sudden sense the pheromone and do the Feline to pull that pheromone in to say, hey, what is that? Where is that coming from? And so it's just about detecting that pheromone. And so pheromones are species specific, and so it is the pheromones in the environment that are triggering the Feline response. So pheromones can travel in the air, so a cat that's outside of your house, a stray cat that's outside your house, if your window's open, you know, pheromones can be coming into the window. And so they might be doing that Feline inside your house in response to a cat that's outside of your house.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so this is a question I know I've encountered. Is there any special reason that cats absolutely hate to have their nails trimmed?
I think it's because they weren't socialized to it. The thing about socialization is, you know, when cats are open, and this is true of cats and dogs, during that critical period for socialization, they're open to learning to accept all kinds of things. And rarely do we cut a cat's nails when they're little kittens during that socialization period. And so one reason is we just didn't socialize them to accept it. So the younger they are when you start the process, the more accepting they're going to be to it. But I also think it's because, you know, their foot pads are so sensitive, and I think they might not like to have their feet held because of that. The other thing about cats is that, you know, cats are not only a predator, but they're also a prey species. And so, you know, anytime they feel restrained against their will, they're going to panic. And oftentimes when people go to cut their cat's nails, they kind of grab the cat and hold them down and then try to cut their nails. So it might be more about the restraint than the actual nail cutting. But I think it's a combination of all of those things with most kitties.
All right, thanks so much for that answer. Scrolling through, I'm seeing so many different things coming in. I think we have a time for maybe one more question. All right. So is grooming another cat, is that a form of dominance or aggression? It's often followed by fighting, it sounds like, between her two cats when one cat grooms another.
Okay, so grooming is a social behavior, and cats do groom each other a lot. What's probably happening is that one cat either wants to groom the other more than the recipient wants, and so one cat might have a lower threshold for that kind of interaction. If you think about humans, you know, our behavior, we can be the same. Some people are real cuddly and some people are not. But it is a social behavior, and so I think what happens is one might be being a little bit too forceful and saying, no, I want to groom you, and the other one says, well, I'm not in the mood to be groomed right now. So I don't think the grooming itself is, it's not a form of aggression. I think it can just trigger annoyance if, you know, if the recipient isn't in the mood.
I hear that. Sometimes you just want to be left alone.
That's right.
All right. Well, that does bring us to the end of our webinar. I see that there are a lot of great questions, and so you can always rely on Alley Cat Allies to help. You have our website there at the bottom of your screen, just alleycat.org. We also have our National Cat Help Desk, which can definitely help, especially if you have questions concerning outdoor community cats. We have resources for you, and that email address is info, so INFO, @alleycat.org. I know our National Cat Help Desk specialists would love to help you in any way that they can. I do want to remind everyone that this session has been recorded. And so I know some of you are at work or scattered about and doing different things. And so you will receive a link to this recorded session in the follow-up email. And then we'll also have a link to a survey in that email. So please do take some time to let us know how we did. Before we all go, I just want to, from all of Alley Cat Allies, and I think from all of you, thank Kelly for being here today and sharing all of this wonderful information. I'm just really excited to be able to offer this resource to everyone, and I really look forward to webinars number 2 and 3.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for hosting, and thank you everyone for your attention.
All right, thanks everyone. We're going to go ahead and sign off. So thanks for being here today, and we hope to see you next month.